What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the final episode of the season. Dangle Betselli live on FTN Network and Game Plus Network, presented by PointsBet Canada. Chris Meaney and the Eric Young here with you. Troy in the house as well. The most wonderful episode of the year. Is it because it's our last? No, it's because Troy has been asking us to talk fantasy hockey rankings on this show. Way too early, 2023 fantasy hockey rankings. Of course, the NHL draft is about 7 days away, and free agency gets underway July 13th. On Tuesday, we ran through some of our favorite, actually not our favorite, just the top free agents that are available in the NHL at each position. Today, we will roll through our top 10 to 15 rankings at the forward position, defense, as well as goalies. Of course, if you guys have any questions, you can leave them there. We're hoping that we are back in time to preview next year's hockey season, some team previews, more rankings, things like that. Guys changing places, which we will see some chaos, hopefully, throughout the summer as well. But we will be away from you guys for a little bit. Adam Rentkamp in the house, the Eric Young in the house. What's up, sir?
Yeah, it's a sad day. You know, the hockey's over. I haven't fully accepted that yet. I think I'm gonna watch the 1986 Canada Cup. Every game starting tomorrow.
You're gonna watch
morning.
it again, yeah? Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll start with the 71 Summit Series, and then I'll go to the 86 Canada Cup. I got both of those downstairs, and when I'm feeling lonely and there's no hockey, that's what I do. I watch those, and they're unreal. And it seems like a completely different game. Everyone's in slow motion, and everyone is the meanest hockey player you've ever seen in your life. It's so violent. It's so insane. Yeah, if you want to see something interesting, you could purchase those DVDs. I'm sure there's places you can find it. Anyways, it's been an unbelievable ride. This season was awesome. I mean, arguably for me, my favorite hockey season of all time, mostly because of this show and the group of people we get to converse with, a couple times a week and, follow through social media and talk and start all these relationships. It's just, we've built this really cool group. And I mean, I'm not speaking for Chris, but I think he probably agrees, is we couldn't have done it without you guys, growing the show and getting sponsorships and getting on Game Plus Network. That has everything to do and very little to do with us. So yeah, we thank you guys a lot. And I'm not going to cry, but I want to a little bit. Yeah. I imagine we will be back next season, but you just never know. It's a wild world. The sports world is crazy, and hockey is definitely the redheaded stepchild of the sports world in the United States. But we're fighting the good fight. This show did very, very well. And like I said, that's all thanks to you guys that are watching and listening and subscribing and doing all those kind of annoying things that we ask you to do every week. I know, it doesn't take a lot of work, but it is not lost on us that you guys do it. And the reason the show did so well this year and will most likely be back next year is because of you. And we can't thank you guys enough.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. Absolutely. We love the support from you guys. This has just been the first year. We hope to grow this show, and we certainly hope to be back. We're very fortunate that we landed a spot on Game Plus Network and landed a sponsor as great as PointsBet Canada. So we are super thrilled with how things have gone, and let's wrap up and have some fun. We're always available, guys. At the Eric Young, at Chris Meaney, we truly are hockey psychos. You guys are as well. So you guys ever have any questions, any season-long stuff, any keeper league stuff, you just want to, talk hockey with us, by all means, absolutely. Leave us those questions. Adam, best part about hockey offseason is that it's back in a few months and don't have to wait until the next calendar. And it really doesn't stop. Like, football doesn't stop. Like, football's so intense. But hockey's kind of the same way, right? We mentioned the draft. It's 1 week away. Yep. We got free agency. Guys are going to shift, teams. We'll get some trades, of course, in the offseason. And then camps will be opening up in August, late August. And we'll be talking, NHL team previews in September. And, Troy and I believe Adam, we had a little bit of a back and forth on social media yesterday on Twitter talking about best ball leagues over at Underdog Fantasy. We are doing those if you're interested. From a football standpoint, we are doing them on Mean Streets and here on our FTN Network YouTube page. You and I are going to get together and do a couple when we get closer to the hockey season. We would love to have you guys do them with us. We can do a live draft on the show. You guys can be in the same draft. We can be in the same league. We can have some fun. Maybe we can do a listeners league if you guys are interested in that as well. So, leave us any notes. DMs are open. Tag us on Twitter if you want to do something like that. And today, like I said, we're just going to try to have some fun. when guys switch jerseys and off season, with the free agency stuff, I'd love to have Eric on Mean Streets, and we can have a bit of a hockey conversation there too, and you guys can join us, and we can get into what all of that means. Before we get into rankings, and George, show us the swag, boys. Yeah, what are you rocking over there? What is that? It's not Leafs. Oh, it's the No Deeks.
Yeah,
it's the Nordiques. I just showed you before. Actually, I should have just had it. Why didn't I have it, guys? I should have had it.
Because it smells.
It smelled really bad.
Yeah.
So my rec league in Toronto, I'm not in Toronto anymore, but the past, lived there for like 7-8 years. And I landed on a rec league team where we had No Deeks. And it was the exact same. It just had No Deeks on the bottom of the Quebec jersey. But I am rocking the C for the Canadians, the C for Carey Price, the C for Chris Meaney. It's an old school Habs. When I was in Toronto, everyone thought that it was a Toronto Carey Price jersey, and it is not. Eric, we had a trade yesterday.
Yeah.
Your boy, Kevin Fiala, our Kings. We talked about the Kings on Tuesday at 45-1 to win the Cup. You can no longer get 45-1. 40-1 is all you can get. The Minnesota Wild flipped Kevin Fiala to the Los Angeles Kings in return to the 19th overall pick in this year's NHL draft and prospect defenseman Brock Faber, who really wasn't going to sign there anyways. So good deal for both squads, I'd say. And then they locked him up, as you saw, 7 years, 7.875, something like that. Man, he had a really good season, a breakout campaign from him. And you and I chatted about him when he was in Nashville, like wanted to see a little bit more. And then he left Nashville, and, he was really good with the Wild. And I expect he's going to be really, really good in Los Angeles. And, man, they are building something special. They have a deep prospect pool. There's still a lot of nice pieces in their prospect pool. And Kevin Fiala is a nice addition to their squad. What do you think of the move?
Yeah, like you said, it's a great move for both teams. The Minnesota Wild are still in big trouble salary cap wise. There's a lot of stuff that they've got to get done there. Bill Guerin has got his work cut out for him. And the Los Angeles Kings just continue to build a really special team, in my opinion. I like this team last season. I put futures on it for them to play for the Stanley Cup. Obviously, didn't cash on that one, but they made some noise in the playoffs, and that was even with arguably their best player in Drew Doughty not playing. He may not be their best player, but I would say he's probably their most important player.
Oh, yeah.
He's the glue that holds that team together. Obviously, their best defenseman. That pairing of him and Mikey Anderson was unbelievable when he was healthy. And I think that caught me for sure. And I feel the whole NHL world by surprise. That was one of the best tandems in the league when they were playing and both healthy. Mark my words, the Los Angeles Kings are going to make a pile of noise next season. Kevin Fiala is a young guy, but the reality is I don't think we're even scratching the surface on what he can do offensively. I think if they pull the reins off him totally, maybe they pair him with Danault so he doesn't have to worry about playing a 200-foot game because Danault's got that covered and he can kind of cheat and not worry so much about defensive responsibilities, and he can really press the gas on the offense. You could see 30, 40 goals from this guy easily. And he's a kid. He's young. He's still really, really young. So that's, like I said, like he's going to get stronger. He's going to get bigger. And offensively, like he's just a guy that can just kind of hold on to the puck forever. You'd be watching Minnesota Wild games. You'd be like, oh, look at Kaprizov go. And then you realize, oh, no, that's Kevin Fiala. Yeah. They don't wear, close to the same number, but they have a very similar style. And Kaprizov is a superstar already, but I believe Kevin Fiala could be kind of the next big thing offensively for the Los Angeles Kings. Great thing by them. Guerin's doing some work. I mean, he's got a lot of work to do. They're still in trouble, like I said, but it's a really cool trade. And hopefully we see some more movement. And I think because of the salary cap freeze, we're going to see a lot more movement than we're used to because teams weren't planning on these financial restrictions, right? So I think we're going to see maybe the most movement ever in an offseason this season. There's so many teams that are just completely up against it and have to make moves.
Man, I would love that. I'm here for chaos and guys switching. I love trades and signings. It's awesome. Obviously, it gives you something to talk about, but it just kind of spices it up just a little bit. Yeah, couldn't agree more with what you said about Kevin Fiala. A career high 33 goals and 85 points, of course, in a contract year. Surprise, surprise. Things that we talked about.
Big
on
surprise,
Tuesday,
everybody.
things that we've talked about for a long, long time. None of the metrics really scream outlier at all. I mean, he's a 25-year-old left winger who has 4 20-goal campaigns. 23 was his breakout season, his first real full season in the NHL in 2017-2018. He played a game in 2014 with the Preds. He played 5 in 2015. He played 54 in 2016. He showed some offense ability that season, 11 goals, averaging 13 minutes per game. And then he had that breakout campaign, 80 games, 23 goals, 48 points, 15 minutes per game. He shot 12%. A bit of a down year, 2018 for him. He only had 10 goals, 32 points, and then you saw the trade, right? Nashville was really moving some pieces that year, right? It was Mikael Granlund, I think, went the other way in that deal. And then 2018, he went on to play 19 games with the Wild, and he had 7 points. But he did get a massive boost in ice time, where in Nashville, he was only playing 15 minutes per game. And then in Minnesota, when he was traded, he played 17:38 per game. And then this past year, he played 17:39 per game. So with Minnesota, in the 3 full seasons, he had at least 20 goals in each of them, 54 points, 40, and 85. And his shooting percentage stayed true, 12%, 12%, 13%. So I don't believe last year was a huge outlier. And I was just looking at some of the 5-and-5 numbers as well. Just a really strong player, 5-and-5. The expected goal rate, at 5-and-5, courtesy of Natural Stat Trick, was inside the top 20 for players at 16.58. And there were some players in there inside the top 10 that, played a little bit less than him. So if we're looking at players that played at least 1,000 minutes at 5-and-5, Kevin Fiala was 17th in expected goals for at 5-and-5. So he created a lot of offense himself, and he didn't play with Kaprizov, really.
No.
And he didn't play on the first power play unit, really.
No.
So he's going to get top power play unit in LA.
Oh, yeah.
I think that they probably play him with the no, but they could do a little Kempe. They can do a little Kempe, Kopitar, Fiala, but, it bolsters their power play. It bolsters their top 6. And as of right now, I'm looking at their squad. According to Cap Friendly, they have $11 million in projected cap space. They need to sign Adrian Kempe. Gabriel Velarde is not going to cost them too much, and Andreas Athanasiou, I say, probably leaves. But Sean Durzee's a nice little young piece. He's an RFA. I don't think he'll cost too much either. I don't know if they'll bring back Alexander Edler, but they do have some cap space. They do have some prospects. They are on the rise for sure. One free agency question there from Adam Kadri to Edmonton. Is that possibility? I suppose that it is. But again, what Kadri said yesterday, and I'm paraphrasing, but I did see the graphic kind of come through social media yesterday, is that he basically said he knows what he's worth. He's taken a pay cut now. I mean, he's been on one of the friendliest contracts for years, right? The Leafs signed him to sub-5, and he's a solid number 2 center, and he had a breakout campaign. So he's saying he knows what he's worth. He loves the situation in Colorado. Yeah, sure, he can take a pay cut, and maybe they can start something special in Colorado. But ultimately, when he sees a guy like Kevin Fiala get nearly 8, and for Kadri being a center, he could push 9+.
Easy.
So I don't think the Oilers can afford to pay him 9+.
Yeah, and the reality is, I mean, look at Wayne Gretzky got traded, so anything can happen. Do I think Kadri could go to Edmonton? I feel if that's something that the Edmonton Oilers do, then just burn the whole franchise. They don't need centers. What do they need? And we said this last year and the year before. What do they need? What do they need to spend every dime on that they have left? A goalie. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins could be a number 1 center on any team in the NHL. I believe that. I believe that with my heart. And if not, a really, really high level too. They've got, they have McDavid, Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins down the middle. The last thing they need is a center. Do I think Kadri could help them? Of course. Then Draisaitl can play with McDavid. Kadri could play on that second line as the second line center and probably play the bumper position in the power play. And offensively, they They could be unstoppable. But in the end, if you have 41-year-old Mike Smith as your starting goalie again, it's going to be the same result. So that's what they need to do is most important. I mean, for me, I think maybe the best fit is Philadelphia. I mean, is there a more Philadelphia Flyers player than Kadri in the entire NHL? If I think about and close my eyes real hard, like I could see him wearing that jersey. He plays, like I get it. Like the Broad Street Bullies are not a thing anymore. The Philadelphia Flyers are not a thing anymore. But when you think of the Philadelphia Flyers, you think of tough, hard-nosed hockey, and they haven't been that in several years. And there's some surprises coming up in our ADP list. I know I will get ridiculed for one of the goalie rankings that I have, but John Tortorella is going to change this team. He does this everywhere he goes, except for when he went to Vancouver. He makes the team the first year he's there twice as good as they were the year before. So would it surprise me that the Philadelphia Flyers make the playoffs? No. And do I think they can make some real noise if they end up with Kadri? Absolutely not. Like this, there's a ton of skill all over this team. They just have been poorly coached, not having the right personnel in the right positions. Kadri could be the number one center on the Philadelphia Flyers today.
Yeah, he could. And Philly's not as bad. They're
really not as bad as their record says. There's no way.
Yeah. You're really drinking the Philly Kool-Aid and John Tortorella, and I dig it. I like it. I don't know if I'm completely there yet, but they do have some nice players. I gotta remember Sean Couturier too is one of the better two-way players in the league.
He barely played all year.
See him last year. Yeah. Like
Kevin Hayes is a great player, making way too much money.
And he had some issues too. Yeah, making a little bit too much money. There are three teams that I have circled down here for Kadri potential landing spots. One is Pittsburgh. Now, they would have to move away from Evgeny Malkin. Maybe they get a little bit younger with Kadri. Maybe they want to go another way. Like, that'd be a nice 1-2 punch with Crosby and Kadri. Carolina is another one. I don't think that Kotkaniemi is ready for a second-line role, and Trocheck is off the books. Niederreiter is off the books. And the Rangers are another one, too. Like, I'm sure they could go with the kids if they wanted to. Maybe Alexis Lafreniere plays a little bit of center on that second line. Maybe Hedl is ready for a larger role. Ryan Strome comes off the books. Maybe they go Kadri. That's another team that I have circled. Cap friendly. We won't spend too much time on this because we did it in the last episode. But cap friendly, like all the teams that have this cap space, they're just not competitive squads where I feel Kadri will go to. Anaheim, Detroit, Buffalo, Arizona. Calgary's got a lot of cap space, but they got to sign Tkachuk. They got to sign Gaudreau. Colorado, obviously, they got some guys here to sign. We're not closing the door on Kadri going back there. The Devils got Nico Hischier, and Jack Hughes is probably not a fit. Ottawa, not likely. And then Pittsburgh is there, of course, Letang and Malkin off the books. And then Ottawa, he probably doesn't go to Ottawa. How would Leaf fans feel about Kadri in an Ottawa jersey? The Kraken are probably not doing it. Your Preds, potentially, right? I mean, if they can't bring back Forsberg, but why not just sign Forsberg to the money he wants instead of Kadri? And then you got the Blue Jackets and Blackhawks and Stars in there as well, along with Carolina. So there's a lot of teams that got some cap space, but a lot of those teams that I just mentioned are not Stanley Cup ready. Having Kadri would help them, but ultimately they still are, I don't think, not playoff teams, those ones.
A lot of time that's the choice, though, right? Like he's took the cut and he just won the Stanley Cup.
Sure.
He's got his Stanley Cup. He's already got it. So now it's just about setting him up for the rest of his play. The team that pays him the most is where he's going to go. I don't care what anybody says.
That's what you think. He'd rather take the dough than go make another run. Yeah. I mean, you see that all the time in sports.
Since this is an Ottawa Senator show, I think I would really like to see him as an Ottawa Senator.
Sure.
Plus, it's chaos, and Maple Leafs fan would lose their minds.
Yeah.
And they would play, Kadri against the Leafs, 6-8 times a year would be amazing. So sign me up for that.
It would be wild. Adam, Minnesota, JT Miller. Yeah, Minnesota, they're an interesting squad too. JT Miller had a phenomenal season. He's got 1 year left on his deal, and then he's going to get a massive deal. So, yeah, I feel like whoever trades for JT Miller, and Vancouver should trade him. They should deal him and get some nice pieces, some nice prospects, continue to build. You can get a really nice haul for JT Miller. Maybe it's a trade. Maybe it's a trade that happens at the NHL draft. Maybe it's something that happens at the NHL trade deadline when the Canucks are not in the playoffs. The Wild do have some nice young pieces. Marco Rossi's a nice young center that we'll probably see next year as well. So I don't think it's a a trade that we see between those two teams. But man, if you're Vancouver, you make something like that happen where you can get some nice young pieces in return.
And he made it pretty clear he doesn't want to leave Vancouver, right? That's a slippery slope to trade for a player that doesn't want to leave.
That doesn't want to leave, yeah.
I get it. It's fun sitting here talking about, oh, we'll trade this guy and trade that guy and we'll move this, and we don't have to think about it. These are human beings with families, and he made it very clear. He was pretty openly upset about all the rumors about him being traded. And him not wanting to leave Vancouver. So that'll be interesting to see. And, it's a lot of times as, us fantasy GMs want to remove that from them because we don't have to talk to these players and we don't have to treat them like they're human beings. But that's part of the factor as well. And I don't know enough about his contract. Does he have a no trade? I don't think he does, but I'm not sure on that. So, the reality is do you want to trade for a player that doesn't want to go to your team? It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, Vancouver's interesting. I mean, Brock Besser's an RFA. There were some reports about him being traded, last year. So you got Bo Horvat with 1 year left. You got Miller with 1 year left. You just signed Elias Pettersson, but you only signed him to a 3-year deal. So he's got, more bucks in 2 years. And then Quinn Hughes, they were able to lock up quite a bit. And Thatcher Demko is locked up too. But yeah, they have some interesting choices to make. Miller's a really good player, but now he's 29. I would, if I was running the Canucks, I'd do things a lot differently than what they've done over the past couple of years. And
I agree with you. I mean, they should trade him now. I don't know. He may never have this value ever again, being that he's 29. I mean, he may never have a season like that again. He was their best player all season.
We're going to get into rankings here. I was looking, I left JT Miller off my top 15. But in a fantasy league, you and I play in my keeper league, goals, assists, points, power play points, shots, faceoffs, hits, and blocks. JT Miller was a top 10 fantasy hockey player.
Valuable.
Not only was he a top 10 fantasy hockey player, he was number 4 overall in that setting. McDavid was 1, Matthews was 2, Draisaitl was 3, and Miller was 4. Miller won 667
That's insane. I didn't realize that.
So he won just shy of 700 faceoffs. So that clearly has something to do with it. But he had 32 goals and 99 points. He had 38 power play points. It was third in the NHL last year, tied with Victor Hedman and Jonathan Huberdeau. And he chipped in across the board with hits with 172 and blocks 56. He's been one of my favorite, I call him touch 'em all players in fantasy hockey for years because he does hit every single category. And you're right, this is what we're talking about, selling high on a player like this who's had fine seasons, but he had 46 points the year before. He only played 53 games. But in Vancouver, really, he's been a point per game guy over the last 3 years. He's a really, really fine hockey player. That's why the return could be really good. Let's transition into defense. We'll get to yours first. I love this comment from Troy because I don't know about you, but I drafted Ryan Ellis in a lot of spots. And I think I posted one of my underdog best ball squads on our Twitter team and on Twitter, like that when we had this little back and forth. I think Troy and Adam were part of it. And I had Ryan Ellis on a bunch of those squads. Here is your rankings, which has no Ryan Ellis, but I just want to throw out that Ryan Ellis from a fantasy point per game standpoint. Now, he only played a little bit, right? He didn't have a lot of action. He was the 3rd ranked fantasy hockey defenseman from a point per game standpoint. But again, he hardly played, but we know that he is a stud. He's a great player. Rankings.
Yeah, sir. He's a great player. There's no doubt. I mean, a guy that I'm very familiar with. He was drafted here in Nashville, played here. In a weird twist of events, I ended up speaking, being the guest speaker at the development camp the year that him and Seth Jones were drafted. And I'm freaking out because I know who these guys are. And there I am telling them to work hard and just keep digging. And I don't know anything about it, but it was amazing. But I mean, the reality is, top 10, there's no way I could put him in there. And mostly that's just because
he's a
physically, I don't know, man. He is a tiny
right?
human being. I think it would shock most people if they saw him on the street and said, yeah, he plays defense in the NHL. I get that the NHL has changed and smaller players can play, but Ryan Ellis is a little person. Like, I mean, he is a tiny, tiny, tiny person. The amazing part about it is you never really see him get muscled. You never really see him get pushed off the puck. Obviously a massive lower body, like legs for days. But the truth is like playing at that size, like, I mean, we saw it in the playoffs. You know, Barbashev absolutely ended Samuel Girard. You know, just ended him.
Oh,
Samuel Girard is cut from the same cloth. He's a tiny, tiny bodied player that, you know, defensemen are going to take hits. There is just no way around it. You have to be willing to take them to retrieve the pucks and get them out of your end when they're flipped into the corners and stuff. So there's no way I could put Ryan Ellis in my top 10. He's a player.
But he's a late round steal. Yeah. You got Makar at the top.
Yeah. Makar's my number one favorite player to watch in the NHL right now. I wrote about him. We've talked about this a bunch. I keep tooting my horn about the article I wrote about him in The Athletic, and I couldn't have been more right. I mean, this is just the start. He's a child. He's only going to get better. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He's going to get smarter, which shouldn't be possible, but it's just the reality. He's not even a fully developed man yet. That's coming. And good luck to the rest of the NHL. He just dictates the play, controls the entire ice, not just the defense, not just the offense. Like, he's Erik Karlsson in his prime on steroids. That's what Cal Makar is. He can do all the things that Erik Karlsson did when he played in Ottawa, and it was like he never came off the ice. He can do all of those things, and also he's twice as responsible defensively and is very, very physical. Very physical for a player that has the puck all the time. Like, you see highlights of him reverse hitting guys and rubbing them out along the boards. He's the prototypical defenseman for the NHL nowadays. I don't think there's a better player in the NHL, period.
I agree. I think Cale Makar is at the top of the world. And like we said in the last episode, he's just kind of scratching the surface, entering his prime. So let's bring that list up one more time. We'll roll through one guy that I couldn't get on my list that I do believe is a top 10 defenseman in the NHL is Shay Theodore. I'll get to my rankings in a little bit. I just kind of ranked guys, including hits and blocks and shots. So that kind of does skew things a little bit. I think if you're playing in a fantasy hockey league with just straight up goals, assists, points, and power play points, I think Shay Theodore and Quinn Hughes are both top 10 defensemen. You got Yossi at 2, Fox at 3, Ekblad, Carlson, Moritz Seider, Quinn Hughes, Morgan Riley, McAvoy, Charlie McAvoy, and then Shay Theodore in there as well. Was this tough for you to put this list together? I had a hard time, actually, to put mine together.
Yeah, I mean, at this point of the year, I mean, just put a blindfold on, you know, like it's, you have no idea. I kind of, like, I really wanted to move Seider up. I believe the Detroit Red Wings are going to be massively improved next year. And you mean, like, if we're calling Makar a child, then, I mean, Seider's a baby. He's an infant, you know, and it was unbelievable this year. He was, I mean, for me, no doubt the best player for the Red Wings. Came out of nowhere for me. Like, I knew that he was highly sought after by Detroit, but I think a lot of people thought that was a reach for them in the draft where he was taken. And again, guess what? We're wrong. Steve Yzerman's right. And he's going to be a top 10 defenseman, I think, for 10 or 15 years. He showed things this year that just shouldn't be possible for a kid his age. And again, is going to get bigger, is going to get stronger, is going to get smarter, and is going to continue to play on better teams with better players as Detroit rebuilds. So yeah, I wanted to move him up, but because he's a little more unproven, I kept him down. But he could be, I don't think you would be wrong if you were somebody that really believes in him to take him 3 or 4.
Yeah, and I think it does depend on your settings. I mean, we did see the ice time when he opened up as a rookie. He was playing 22 minutes a game, and then he wrapped up playing 23, 24 minutes a game. So you saw that growth in year number 1. From a fantasy hockey standpoint, again, I'll bring up my rankings 1 second. I have included before you guys come at me with, like, certain guys that are not on the list. Like, honestly, I didn't even want to put Quinn Hughes as a top 10 defenseman, but I think it's important just to kind of hammer home your setting.
This is a fool's errand. Fantasy hockey is insane. Like, every league is different. The scoring is different in every league. There's too many settings. I wish it was more standardized because it's just not. But it makes it impossible to put rankings and stuff. People love rankings. We love to talk about it. But the reality is, you could say we're completely wrong, and I'd agree with you.
Yeah, sure. You and I both play in, I think, the leagues that we're in together. It's pretty simple. No plus minus. In the Fantrax setting, I mean, they have
if you're
so many
playing with
settings
plus
over there.
minus still, shoot
Just
yourself.
get rid of it.
It's awful.
If the Fantrax League, there's all kinds of different settings there. We play with takeaways, and I think we added something others like face-offs or something like that. But hits for me, goals, assists, points, power play points, hits, blocks, shots. So really key for defensemen, hits and blocks. Mort Seider in that setting was number 8 overall fantasy hockey defenseman, and he's one of just a few that have had. Like, he had 187 shots, 151 hits, 161 blocks. There are only a handful of defensemen that had 150 plus of like hits, blocks, and shots. Letang is one of them. Charlie McAvoy is another guy. Noah Dobson was close. Jacob Trouba is a guy that we just don't have here, who is kind of sneaky in that setting. He was a top 12 fantasy hockey defenseman. Yeah, because of those like other categories that he brings. Bangers leagues, what we always talk about so much. Mackenzie Weegar is another guy last year who finished as a top 12 fantasy hockey defenseman, and this year finished as a top 12 fantasy hockey defenseman in those settings. None of us have him ranked as a top 15 defenseman, but he is sneaky in that format. There's another guy here. Darnell Nurse is another one that kind of fit that mold. And then Justin Falk and then Josh Morrissey. These are other guys that kind of hit their century mark for those settings. So I'll bring up mine here. I went a little bit deeper, but keep in mind I went knowing with those were my settings. So Cale Makar, like you up at the top, Yossi, Hedman, Fox, Ekblad, Carlson, Riley, Letang, Seider. And this is kind of where I was just like, I struggled a little bit. Charlie McAvoy is in there. Quinn Hughes is in there because Quinn Hughes is going to get 60 plus points, but he's going to offer you nothing really from a hits or block standpoint. Just keep that in mind. I think Quinn Hughes is a little bit overvalued in that setting. If you're playing straight up points, by all means, I think he's a top 10, top 5 upside for sure. But he didn't even finish as a top 17 defenseman in that setting that I'm talking about, hits and blocks. But we know that he's a fantastic overall defenseman. Just be aware of your settings. Noah Dobson's in there for me. I thought he was fantastic. He finished as a top 10 fantasy hockey defenseman. He really broke out last year and took over the number 1 spot on the power play and logged heavy minutes down the stretch. Drew Doughty was a top 10 defenseman as well from a point per game standpoint, but he suffered that injury. It was a wrist surgery that he went through here in the offseason. We love the Kings. I like Doughty. I think he still has a lot to offer. I got Rasmus Dahlin jumping inside the top 15, and then Devon Taves from a point per game. Again, he was a top 15 fantasy defenseman, playing with Cale Makar, getting a lot of points, blocking some shots, actually throws his body around a little bit. There are maybe some snubs in case you're like wondering of certain guys that we potentially, for me, that I felt like, wow, these guys could certainly be in the top 15 that aren't. Seth Jones, believe it or not, he finished as a top 10 fantasy defenseman with hits and blocks. He had 51 points, 19 power play points. Mentioned Trouba, mentioned Mackenzie Weegar. No Alex Pietrangelo in there. If I was to rank top 20, Pietrangelo and Shay Theodore would be next on my list as guys that I feel like should be in there. Zach Werenski is not on that list. I know Troy, again, just doesn't really offer a whole lot from the hit standpoint and a block standpoint. He did have 48 points. He missed some games. He finished 17th overall in points per game among defensemen. So if you're playing with just goals, assists, points, shots, he loves to shoot the puck and power play points. You could certainly make a case for him to be a top 15 guy as well. Brent Burns is not on this list. He was inside the top 15 as well. So we're splitting hairs with some of these guys. I wanted to rank them for just hits, blocks, shots, because those are the formats that I play in, and I think a lot of people play in those formats as well. We got to keep things moving along because we got some forwards and goalies to talk about as well. Let's bring up your goalies, George, if we want, and this is where everyone's going to come at Eric because he's got Carter Hart, number 9. Oh, baby. Explain yourself, sir.
Well, there's a couple reasons. One, this is a highly touted guy, and everyone, including me, thought he was going to be the next big thing in goaltending. People that really know goaltending. Goaltending is voodoo. It's just the reality of it. But the number one reason is Tortorella is going there. Tortorella is usually the salve for bad goaltending. The style that he wants everyone blocking shots and mucking up the middle and making it hard to get high danger chances, and that will make the goalies better automatically. Carter Hart is a guy, when I was with The Athletic, I wrote about him saying he was going to be the next big thing for the Flyers, and I still believe that to be true. He was not good last year and wasn't good the year before. But I think if he can shake off those confidence, that rust that's built up around him and the cloud around his confidence, and can get himself some confidence, get some wins early, then Carter Hart could really start to feel it. And the biggest reason is I believe because of the injuries and because of Tortorella going in there, the Philadelphia Flyers are going to be much improved. And Carter Hart, I mean, I don't think this is a contract year, but I feel like, I mean, people close to him, his agent, and mostly himself is saying, man, I've just got to be better or I'm going to be out of the NHL. And that's, I don't think he's going to be out of the NHL. I think someone would pay him to be a goalie somewhere because of his credentials and because of where he was taken and all of the noise around how good of a goalie this guy was at the lower levels. I think he puts it together next year. And sometimes with goaltending, it just takes time. And he's had time. He's had experience, has played on some really bad teams, was missing arguably his best defenseman last year. I think if Provorov stays around there and Ellis stays healthy, they could be one of the top tandems in the league. But the number one reason is he has been touted to be the next big thing in goaltending, and sometimes it takes time. And the number two is John Tortorella. Come at me.
Yeah. No, he's only 23 years old. We can't write this kid off. We just can't. Yep. He's 2 years ago this time, he was getting compared to Carey Price. When the Flyers bounced the Canadiens in the playoffs, it was all Carey Price versus Carter Hart, Carey Price versus Carter Hart. I thought those were a little unfair comparisons, but that's just the way things work in sports. You got to compare young prospects to other players. And like Carey Price, he struggled to start. Remember Halak and Price? Halak was better. Price was thrown into a playoff game. I remember they were playing Washington, and it was one of the biggest upsets in NHL history. They came back and they beat the Capitals, but there was a game where they played Carey Price against Washington because Halak had struggled at moments in that series. They put in Carey Price. I remember Backstrom scored a goal on Price, and Price took the puck out of his net and shot it in the corner at Backstrom and hit him in the back of the head. He was so frustrated, and everyone was talking about, wow, this goalie who's supposed to be the next best thing is absolutely lost it. He's got no control. Let's get him out of town. And what happened? Like, he eventually figured it out. So he's way too young to write him off. The Flyers have had brutal defense. You've said it all. And missing Sean Couturier, a really good, strong defensive forward. So the high danger chances, the defense has been awful. And one thing, and people are so smart enough, watching the show and listening to the show, just because you have Carter Hart ranked as your 9th goalie doesn't mean you need to take him there. He's going to go inside the top 15. You are ranking guys where you think that they could finish. So that is just showing that you have really good value. You think he's very valuable in drafts. You can pick him up, towards the end of your draft, and he's got top 10 upside. I thought Leonard was interesting in there as well. Maybe just a bounce back for Robin Leonard. He's way too good than what we saw last year. He dealt injuries on that Vegas team. Dealt with so many injuries. Yeah, I suppose he
wasn't healthy for most of the year. It was still pretty decent. Had surgery. They're getting another coach. I still think that this is a similar team that started last year. Injuries up and down their lineup. They got Pietrangelo. They've got Shay Theodore. I think they'll have Carlson and Riley Smith back. A great defensive forwards. Mark Stone is unbelievable defensive forward.
It'll be a different Vegas team next year.
Leonard is a good goalie. He's humongous. He just needs a decent team in front of him. Let Vegas, from about halfway through the year, turn into a really bad team. And mostly that has to do with the weird coaching change and injuries all over the lineup.
I wish we could get into, Calder stuff, Troy and Blackenberg. I know you're such I think you play a lot of keeper and dynasty hockey just from you hanging out here on the show. You're certainly in tune with some of the younger prospects. I think Robin Leonard, he's another guy that you're just going to be able to get value. People are going to be unsure about him. He was on average the second goalie taken off the board last year. I was a little uncertain myself. I'm not a huge Leonard fan. I think when he's healthy, he's on top of his game, but I think there's just a lot of question marks. But, new coaching staff in there, and absolutely everything went wrong for Vegas last year. You're right. So another guy that I think you're going to be able to get at a pretty good discount. I think Logan Thompson is pretty good. I feel like it's going to be closer to a split, but who knows, right? The coaching staff, there's just new things, right?
They're all a split now. There was one or two goalies that played the majority of the games. They're all a split now. So everyone, look at the NHL's changed. Just get used to it. I've been saying this. How long have we been saying this? And I know I said it years ago when our first show. drafting fantasy teams, draft tandem goalies.
Yes.
Teams that you think have good goaltending and block a bunch of shots, draft them both.
Well, speaking of that, let's throw up mine here, George. And you see, I got 2 Florida guys in there, and Sergei Bobrovsky, and then Spencer Knight. I think that's a strong 1-2 punch. Florida's going to be just as good. They really are. I don't know if Paul Maurice is the perfect fit for the Panthers, but he is a really good coach. But they're going to win another 40 games. It's a good 1-2 punch. Jeremy Swayman is in there at 14, but Linus Ullmark is another guy, like a decent 1-2 punch for the Boston Bruins. But Vasilevsky up at the top, just out of the respect, has just been one of the safest goalies over the past few years. I have no problem if you want to go Shesterkin 1. Sorokin was number 2 in save percentage and shutouts last season. He was absolutely phenomenal. I don't think Varlamov's going to be a part of the squad. He shouldn't get a lot of play anyways. For Sorokin last year, .925 save percentage and 7 shutouts. Jacob Markstrom was fantastic last year as well. So was Anderson, your guy UC Saros. I got Darcy Kemper here. If he remains with the Colorado Avalanche, I think he could finish as a top 5 goalie again. If he goes somewhere else, maybe he drops down the board for me. Jake Ottinger had a really nice breakout campaign in the playoffs, but he was strong all season long for the Stars. Thatcher Demko, same thing with Fleury. If he stays with the Wild, I probably keep him there. Another 1-2 punch with him and Cam Talbot. But if he went to the Leafs, he went to the Oilers, I probably still keep him there, and I doubt I'll have many shares because, Toronto's a very popular team. Edmonton's a very popular team. I play in a lot of fantasy hockey with people who like those teams, and, just because he's on a big market team, he'll jump up draft boards. It's just the way it is, so I may not have a lot of shares if he does land on those squads, but Tristan Jarry's in there, and then Connor Hellebuck as well. I think the interesting duo is those Florida guys, right? Another year of Bobrovsky. They definitely should keep Spencer Knight. He's the goalie of the future. Do they panic as a franchise and flip Bobrovsky and a bunch of first-round picks or maybe some prospects to get him off the books? Do they decide, oh, man, Bobrovsky was pretty good. We got a window here. Maybe we'll roll with him for a couple years and they trade Spencer Knight. I think that would be a mistake, but they're an interesting team. They could really make some moves in the offseason. Like, it could be panic mode for that team. I don't think it should stay the course, but man, they could really free up a lot of bucks if they can get rid of Bobrovsky's $10 million contract. Let's get to forwards. We'll throw yours up first because look at this. Conor McDavid up at the top. No surprise, but man, what a picture from our guy George here.
Unbelievable. That's going to follow him forever. I said it in our Slack. I mean, good for him that he's good at hockey. Dude. Oh, man. It's what a find by George. This show looks and feels as cool as it is because of George. Absolutely. Not because of Conor McDavid, but look at you. I mean, I think I don't remember the stat, but I think there was like 2 games left in the Stanley Cup, and he was still ahead of all players still playing by 6 points. Like, we saw somehow magically another gear from Conor McDavid just when you think that it wasn't possible. So yeah, I mean, in any league, in any scoring format, and in anything, Conor McDavid, because he's definitely not an infant, but he's still young. I mean, like, I still believe we have not seen his best hockey, and that very well could come this season.
Over under 40 goals for Ovechkin next season.
Man, it's a fool's errand to say. It's a fool's errand to say under, right? Because he just keeps putting 50 in the net. But I mean, as a person that's 42 and thought he was indestructible when he was 35, I can tell you that Father Time is undefeated. But I mean, he doesn't have to do anything. He just stands at the top of the circle and rips pucks in the net. So this season, I would say over.
So that would, if he went over 40, that would put him at 820 goals and just 70 shy of Wayne Gretzky. He's doing it, dude. He's doing it, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it. He's doing it. 50 goals last season. He's 36. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that list, right? Like Crosby's, Crosby still has it. Again, check your settings. He's not a guy that throws his body around a lot, but you don't want to overvalue. Just be like, I want this guy because it hits. But Crosby's still one of the better players in the league. Kucherov as well. Missed a lot of time, but a point per game guy. And certainly worthy of a top 10 selection. And then here's my top 15. No Binnington, got no Blues in the goalie situation. Binnington was close. I expect a rebound from him, but it was really tough to kind of fit him in the top 15.
I really considered him. I really considered him. But just tough for such an up and down season.
Yeah.
He was just so up and down. I can't put him in the top 10.
Here's my forwards, top 15. McDavid at the top. I'm with you and Matthews. Matthews actually finished ahead of Leon Draisaitl last year in the fantasy setting that we're talking about here, ranking guys, hits plus blocks. Faceoffs kind of included here. I tried to keep faceoffs out, like McKinnon doesn't log a lot of faceoffs. He missed some time, but from a point per game standpoint, from fantasy points, he was right there as a top 5 guy. I got Kaprizov ahead of Kucherov. It was tough. You could flip-flop those guys. Huberdeau, Ovechkin, still, I mean, we just talked about it, and he throws his body around. He loves to shoot the puck. Mikko Rantanen. Matthew Tkachuk's another guy, touch them all categories. He hits them all. Johnny Gaudreau's in there. I got Barkov just slightly ahead of Crosby, Steven Stamkos, Mitch Marner. I mean, I really wanted to put your guy Kyle Connor. I had him at 15, and then I'm like, I can't really have him ahead of Mitch Marner. Marner's going to, get like 90 some odd points, but Connor loves to shoot the puck. I value goals a little bit more. So again, splitting hairs, like I feel like personally myself, I would probably draft Kyle Connor ahead of Steven Stamkos. I want to be out before the decline happens. I thought that this year would be the decline. I was completely wrong on him, but those are the top 15 forwards for me. I know we left a lot of studs off the board, but it's way too early. We got some, guys who could, change teams and switch teams. But in this setting that we've been talking about, you may be, wow, Tkachuk. Tkachuk was a top 10 fantasy hockey player in this setting. JT Miller is not on this list. He was a top 10 guy. Kreider was a top 15 guy. Elias Lindholm was a top 20. Timo Meier, a top 20. So was Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor actually finished ahead of Sidney Crosby, but Crosby did miss a little bit of time. So there you go. There's the way too early fantasy hockey rankings, dude.
Way too early.
Way too early. It was tough, to kind of put those together. You mentioned McDavid just on the way out of here. I was in a fantasy hockey playoff pool with 75 people, and you can pick any 12 that you wanted, any 12. And I had all 12 of my players were Avs and Lightning, and I didn't come top 5 because I didn't have McDavid or Draisaitl. I came 1 point away from 5th, which would have got my money back. And I just didn't have McDavid or Draisaitl. Like, those guys ruined fantasy hockey playoff pools. You have to have them. I like to stack teams.
Insane. Yeah.
I like to stack teams, and I was thinking, Colorado and Tampa could go if they go to the finals. Boom, I got like 12 players. This is awesome. I even had Burakovsky and Lehkonen on my squad like a psycho. I just felt like that was the squad. But, if you don't have McDavid and Draisaitl, and I think going forward in playoff squads, you got to have them, because even if they don't play 7 games, they're going to combine for like 20 points, and that's a big chunk of your playoff pool. We got to get out of here. Thank you all for tuning in this season. Dangle, bet, see you soon. Shout out to Game Plus Network, George, Eric Young, all of you guys as well, and PointsBet Canada, and of course, FTN Network. We hope to see you in a couple months. We'll miss you. Cheers.